morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. For weeks, congressional negotiators have been considering folding the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act, a bill intended to support local journalism, into a larger must-pass spending bill. But as many critics pointed out, the JCPA, as it's known, would have failed to do what it aimed. In fact, it might have ended up hurting local journalism. We will discuss that with Al McFarlane of Insight News and Denise Rolark Barnes of the Washington Informer this morning. Good morning, Denise and Al.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Denise. Before we get into the JCPA, we just wanted to get a quick update on the U.S.-Africa Leadership Summit that's going on this week in Washington. Anything new there? Anything interesting?
Well, I think it's always interesting, Stacey, and it's unfortunate that this whole summit is sort of gone under the radar. You've got close to 50 African heads of state from the continent who are here in Washington, D.C. at the Washington Convention Center, meeting with State Department officials and their delegations to really talk about Africa's growth and development. Again, Africa has said for many years, we are not looking for aid. We just want, our support for the projects that we're doing, and not recognizing the fact that, Africa is a young continent with, I think, over half of its population under the age of 19 years old. So they have some real issues that they're trying to address and trying to get United States support for. It's been sort of a list of who's who, not only locally. I know Karine Pierre at the White House, the White House
press secretary,
led a panel yesterday. You've had everybody from Linda Greenfield from the United Nations, who's been here, UN ambassador to the, I'm getting it all wrong, but the American ambassador to the United Nations. And I mean, you name it, everyone is here. There's a lot of African journalists here. I'm going to head over there in a little while, because that's my story, talking to these journalists. And what are some of the issues that they're really covering on the ground? And what is it that they want to take back to their readers and their viewers and folks that listen to their programs? What is it that they want to take back to show the progress of this summit? We know that not much is going to come out of it, let's say by tomorrow when the summit ends. But President Biden has committed a significant amount of money for projects in Africa. They're very, very concerned about environmental and global environmental issues. And I mean, it's a lot that's going on there. And I'm just happy to be sort of in the room, which is really all I am, is in the room.
Right.
But we are doing a big front page story this week in our newspaper, and we'll have even more coverage next week. So hope you'll follow us at the Washington Informer.
Absolutely. WashingtonInformer.com. And Washington Informer does an amazing job. Anthony Tillman with the social media as well. Al, and we're joined by the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr. Before we get to Dr. Chavis, Al, David Youngblood makes a point. He says we better get our stuff together because China is running circles around us in Africa. And that was one of the things that have already come up even before the summit started. Is this a real opportunity for the United States to kind of get in front of what China is doing in Africa?
I think it's an opportunity for Black America to get in front of what Europeans and Chinese and Russians are doing in Africa. I think we're in a particular inflection point in the balance of world power and the access to availability of resources, both material, mineral resources, and in terms of the young population of Africa, human resources. Africa's got it all. In Africa, resources will mean the balance of power for the next generation or two. The question is, how do we leverage the assets we have in Africa to ensure that conferences like this are not modern iterations of the division of Africa, the spoiling of Africa for the benefit of Europeans and of Chinese. And so I think that we as Africans in the West have to leverage our position, our knowledge, our information systems to contextualize this conference, the history, and the futures that we can imagine that advantage our people. So it's a big deal. I think Denise said it's under the radar, and that's unfortunate, but we've got to turn it up. So Denise, I'm glad you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. Denise has a whole staff there. Dr. Chavis, the president said is set to announce anyway that he will do a tour of several African nations next summer. Doc, how important is that to really kickstart new relations between the U.S. and Africa?
Well, thank you very much, and shout out to two of our leading member publishers of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Denise Rolark Barnes and Al McFarlane. I think that the Africa Summit, the U.S. Africa Summit, is an opportunity, but it's also a responsibility for African Americans, as Al and Denise have indicated, that we have to be much more involved proactively. And we shouldn't just wait for an annual conference. This is an annual thing that the White House does. And I think it's good that the president, I was hoping he would even go to Africa in his first 2 years. If he's going next year in 2023, that'll be great. And I hope he visits more than a couple of African nations. Africa is a big continent. And there are a lot of issues in North Africa, in Central Africa, in Southern Africa, in East Africa, West Africa, that all African Americans should be much more aware of. There's business opportunities, entrepreneurial opportunities, but there's also some critical public health issues. There's some critical, the whole question of water. The United Nations has said several years ago, the next world war is not going to be over oil, it's going to be over water. And one of the critical places that we don't have fresh water is not only Flint, Michigan, or Jackson, Mississippi, it's in Africa. But it's not that water is not there, it's the technology to drill for the water. There's an ocean of water under the Sahara Desert. It's just a matter of getting the technology there. And I would encourage our HBCUs that have a lot of talent in engineering and kind of research that needs to be done, working with the Black press, working with entrepreneurs. I was with Robert Smith, a Black billionaire, a few weeks ago, and I was emphasizing to him, I think that the investment community in African America needs to see Africa as a place for investment and get a return on the investment. Of course, African Americans will get more than just a financial return. We'll get a cultural return. We'll get a Pan-African return. We get a sense of our wholeness in the world. And I think I was just with some brothers and sisters from Brazil 2 weeks ago up in Harvard. And same thing. I mean, we are fractured as a people of African descent. And rather than waiting on our former colonial powers or our current powers of oppression to bring us together, that's something that we have to take initiative. I hope that sometime in 2023, Al and Denise, to lead a delegation of the Black press to Africa so that we can sow those ties. And I think you mentioned about the importance of all these different journalists and all these different publications that they represent. I'm hoping that the Black Press USA will become Black Press Global, where we can connect these dots and exchange information. And I'm talking about indigenous information in all these places. And last thing I would say is that we set trends here in America that influences not just the Black world, it influences the whole world. And people go to the bank off of our culture, off of our trends, off of our intelligence. We need to start going to the bank unapologetically in a wealth creation for brothers and sisters in Africa, but also brothers and sisters here in the United States and throughout the diaspora where people of African descent are. Next year is the last year of the decade from 2014 to 2024. there was supposed to be a decade of people of African descent, but a lot of people, even though it's gone on for 10 years, a lot of African Americans still don't know that for the last 10 years, there was supposed to be an international focus on people of African descent.
Well, Dr. Davis, David Youngblood said, make sure you include him in that delegation to Africa. Let's talk about the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act. That is something that it caught my attention. I know it caught all of you. You're the publishers, Denise and Al. Dr. Chavis did write an op-ed about it. What it does, it would attempt to subsidize dying news brands by creating a type of link tax on social platforms. It's supposed to carve out an exception in antitrust law and let publishers across the U.S. band together and negotiate payment from sites that profit from aggregating lists of links on search and social platforms that users can click on to visit news sites. The bill excluded publishers with more than 1,500 employees, which consist of the three major newspapers in the U.S., the Times, New York Times, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal. But it also excludes organizations with less than $100,000 in revenue, which would shut out some small town outlets, as well as some nonprofit and niche local news organizations doing some of the most innovative work in creating a sustainable local news model. After the exclusions, Denise, it leaves the bill's primary beneficiaries as a large mass of big city, high revenue publications whose newsrooms have been gutted by hedge funds like Alden Global, which now owns 51% of U.S. newspapers.
Well, Stacey, this is an ongoing attempt, I think, to get equity for our publications. I know NMPA a few years back, went to the Hill, tried to did get actually a report on the disparities in ad dollars from the federal government and what we thought Congress could do to address that issue. Report for America, beginning of COVID and during COVID, had a couple of initiatives that they sent to the Hill to try to get legislation passed to support local small publications. And they were very sensitive to the fact that Black and Hispanic publications not be excluded from the bill. So now you got this new initiative. And so to me, it seems as though there's a recognition of the power and the importance and the necessity to support local media, but they need to hear us out. And again, I mean, it's unfortunate. Yeah, $100,000 for a business doesn't sound like a lot of money, but for small newspapers, it is a lot of money. We're paying. We never have that much money really coming through our bank accounts and trying to pay reporters, and what have you. So, clearly there is an appetite for supporting local publications. It's just, how do we get to that place where everybody is treated equitably? And this bill seems to have some issues.
Yeah, and Al, I reached out to Senator Amy Klobuchar, who is the sponsor of this bill. Have not yet heard back from her, as well as Chuck Schumer. His office told me last night that they would try and get back to me today. But Al, I guess it's safe to say you echo what Denise is saying here.
Yes, I do. I think, again, this is a moment where we have an opportunity to articulate and advance our specific interest as both small businesses and as Black-owned or non-white media. I think that the danger here, the caution that you have raised, is that this proposed legislation, creates a window of shielding big companies from antitrust activity as they theoretically open themselves to negotiate the equity and sharing of revenue that news organizations, smaller ones in particular, are able to get when their content is shared or when they use content. So on its surface, it's a good idea, but the danger is that, in fact, it does create a new alignment of big money, of big media, of big digital, that moves them closer towards their monopoly, their continued and growing monopoly. So that's a concern. But Be that as it may, this is the right time. It's the right discussion. The question is, how do we show up? And what do we say? And how do we leverage this? I think we have an obligation and a duty, Dr. Chavis, to come to the table and say, yeah, but. And what we have to do is take time to imagine what will be the very best scenario. How much money do our communities need? Do we deserve? Can we get out of this realignment of relationships? We have to articulate our interest and pursue them and negotiate them in this arena. If we don't, we'll be, as we always have too often, getting what they've decided they want to do, and that's crumbs for us and money for them. I say this all the time: we get the misery, they get the money, right? So we get caught in the misery flow of decrying once again our exclusion and our disadvantage. But we can change that. We change it now by being proactive. And this conversation, this discussion, is one of the modalities for asserting that change in how we assemble and project and attain our interest in the marketplace.
Yeah, and Dr. Chavis, the nonprofit Public Knowledge released a statement right after your op-ed, and this is what they had to say. They said this bill is also a threat to content moderation. The bill allows publishers to sue Facebook or Google for taking down content that the platforms find offensive or contrary to their community standards. And we know just saying the word Black sometimes they consider offensive, so they'll remove it. And with the most recent amendment proposed by Senator Ted Cruz, harmful misinformation, networked disinformation, and hate speech will be even harder to police under this bill, and that is by design. The bill will not save local journalism. Instead, it will make a few billionaires even wealthier at the expense of a healthy and open internet and information environment for all of us.
Well, thank you. And, my responsibility at the NNPA is to look at the whole landscape every day, every hour, every second, and to make sure that the interests of the Black press are articulated, are represented, and are protected, and are enshrined in any bill that the Congress is going to ultimately pass. Now, I want to say something good about Senator Gorbachev. She's a progressive. She's been with us. And to her credit, she sponsored a bill that had great intentions. But unfortunately, there's sometimes unintended consequences of people who are trying to do good. And the flaw in this bill was, one, the framers of the bill did not talk to the Black press. They talked to some researchers who had done some limited research on the Black press. And when I began to read some of the research studies that went into the formation of the bill, it was all stereotypical. It was even condescending, paternalistic, and even some, I have to tell you, Al and Denise, even some African-American researchers at some of these non-HBCU universities were making disparaging comments on the record about the Black press. Mm-hmm. Saying that we were antiquated, that we were out of touch, and that funding these other mainstream papers would enable them to do what the Black press is not doing. Of course, I took exception to that. And then they went back and made some changes in the bill, because at first there wasn't a $100,000 threshold. It was even larger. This is a bill that was put together by mainstream media. And then when we started calling questions about it, we got to do something to make sure that we, pretensively include more newspapers. And so, no. But the good news is, because we wrote that op-ed, this bill was attached to the Defense Authorization Bill, which is getting ready to be voted on. Last week, it was taken out because they heard from the Black press of America. And so now we have an opportunity to go back to the negotiating on it. I guarantee you, after the first of the year, we're going to hear directly from Senator Gorbachev's office and all the others who thought that this was going to get weighed through. And of course, they have now the bill reconciled to keep the government going under the Authorization Act. So I think that we have to be cognizant, aware of all these public policy issues. I do salute the Biden-Harris administration for making equity a priority value in their administration. So it's not only on this bill, all bills that the president signs, he has asked his White House staff and asked Senator Schumer on the Senate side, and now Hakeem Jeffers on the House side, to make sure that equity is, and by equity I mean not just inclusive, but equity, economic equity. See, equity has economic consequences, you know, and a lot of times people make reference to people of color, make reference to minorities, quote unquote, or reference to what they call underserved communities, underserved businesses. You know, we get tucked in there. But the thing is, if you look at the fine print, a lot of times people who are intended to do something good for us hurt us because they're doing it from a paternalistic perspective. They don't allow us at the table to the last minute. And then we have to do things like I had to do with the op-ed. You know, and quite frankly, I know I made some Democrats very angry by writing the op-ed, but I had no other choice, because at the end of the day, my job at the NMPA is to promote, to protect, to ensure, and to help make sure that my newspapers, our newspapers, get the advertising revenue, get the opportunities. And if the tech companies are going to start sharing revenue, I want to make sure that our publications are not left out. That's my job.
And Denise, you mentioned earlier about the delegation of the Black press that went to Capitol Hill and got the GAO report. And we know that DC Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton has been a champion of trying to, if not level the playing field as far as advertising in the Black press, certainly trying to bring us into the 21st century as far as the type of monies that are made available by the federal government. Denise, it's always been a struggle for Black newspapers. You know, you
don't remind me, Stacey.
but yet you find a way. Al finds a way, and our other publications find a way to make sure that you're not only delivering news, but information that's vital to our community. What keeps the fight? What keeps that fire burning, Denise?
Well, if not us, you know, who would do this, right? We recognize that there are a lot of issues. I mean, this whole summit we just talked about a few minutes ago, you know, we can't wait for information to be given to us. We really have to go out and seek it, and we have to help to inform our communities about the things that really impact our communities. We have to tell those stories. People are living their lives, and when they take that moment to pick up the newspaper or go online right now, which they can for most of our publications, and read our digital editions and what have you. I mean, we're presenting stories and information and facts about things that impact their lives that, you know, haven't been put in the context that specifically addresses our community. And so it gives them a new sort of informed way of looking at issues. So what drives us? I don't know. I mean, you know, I was born in this thing, so I can't.
This thing of ours
that runs through my veins, you know, the ink that runs through my veins.
Yes.
But we know that we are mission oriented, and this whole digital process, this is costly. You know, anybody, when they say we're antiquated, if they really want to see us, you know, more present digitally, you have to recognize that we need to be supported so that we can afford, you know, the technology, the people to operate the technology, and just the resources to keep this digital process going. Which is going right back to those great big companies, because that's who we have to pay to do the work that we have to do. So I would just, I mean, I'm so proud of our president and CEO, you know, for writing that piece that he wrote, and for being available to address this issue from our perspective. And it is my hope, just like the summit hasn't met with the president, these African leaders haven't met with the U.S. president since 2017, because, you know, the past president did not invite them here. And We, as an organization, haven't had a chance to meet with the Congressional Black Caucus. We've got some dynamic leaders that are coming into that organization who need to know about us and our issues. And so hopefully we will meet with them in March during Black Press Week, and begin to have them as our watchdogs on the Hill, to make sure that we are aware of what's going on there until we can actually have our own, let's say, person on the Hill, a lobbyist per se, because as 501c6, right, Dr. Chavis, we can do that. So, that way stuff won't, get under the radar, and our voices will continue to be heard. But I don't know if I answered your question, other than
you did.
Just feel as though this is our mission.
Well, and there's a snapshot there of Dr. Chavis's op-ed, that you see it in the Madison Times. Al McFarlane, Insight News. So you heard Denise talk about the potential of having a lobbyist. We talked about something big like that, to even something like Dr. Chavis's op-ed that and his being in front of this issue. Talk about the importance for the Black press to have the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the trade that represents them, have that representation.
Well, it's critical. I think the history, the legacy of the Black press of America is one that's powerful and undeniable. Without it, we as owners, as business leaders, don't have the strength individually, but collectively we have more bargaining power, more presence, and we provide a critical service for our people. The service we provide not only is reporting on what's happening in our neighborhood with our churches and our small businesses and our children and teachers, but also showing that the discussions we have locally are part of a fabric of discussion that's national and that's global. Part of the challenge, and I think we continue to rise to the challenge, is creating a public mind in the Black world that allows us to envision change, opportunity, desire, a story, a narrative in which our people win. And we have the power to say that winning for us might not be what they call winning. We can define the power of definition is what we have. It's what we do as newspaper owners. But we can define winning in a way that the Europeans have not, that ultimately allows us to pursue what we call freedom. I believe that our freedom is a freedom that all human beings will enjoy. That's who we have been and who we are. But we're on point, I think, as an organization and as owners and as business leaders in keeping the voice of our people alive. It's important that we not allow ourselves to be marginalized, to be defined as an afterthought or part of a minority or anything else. I think we have to really go to the market loudly, consistently, and confidently, declaring that we have, and that our truth is a truth for humanity, for today and for the future, that it has been. We are the ones shaped the brought meaning to the idea, this experiment called democracy. It didn't exist but for our work as people that were enslaved, right, who always fought for freedom. So we've been the spear of making these grand ideas real and realizable.
Yeah, and Dr. Chavis, before I turn it over to you, as we about to close out, a couple of quick comments. One from David Youngblood, and one from Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times. David says Robert Smith can underwrite a foundation focused on digital transformation in Black media, similar to the Knight Foundation. And Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times asks, "Are we, the NMPA, planning to rally now to contact our respective congressional leaders now to make them aware of the issues in this proposed bill?"
The answer is yes to both. And I think, listen, we winding up 2022. We should go into 2023 much more optimistic. There are signs now that the American economy is not going to go into a recession. Inflation went down by the announcement yesterday of the Treasury Department. So I think that we are poised, but we have to be engaged at all levels, not only at the federal level, also the state level and the municipal level. The Black press has a great future, but I think, as our publicists have said this morning, It requires all of us to be proactive, not just reactive. So yes, we're going to follow this legislation. We're going to make sure that it's inclusive and that our interests are protected. On the other hand, Denise and Al, I'm going to make sure we start collecting this information of all these journalists that are here from all over the African world. We need to strengthen our contact. So, Stacey, I'm going to use my concluding remarks so you can break some new news here on Let It Be Known. What I'm pleased to announce that the NMPA is in the final stages of producing an NMPA global app for the Black news. And I say domestic, I say global, because in the marketplace today, business is global. And these contacts with the Black press in Nigeria, the Black press in South Africa, the Black press in Brazil, the Black press in the Caribbean, the Black press in America, the Black press in Canada, all over the world. The Black press, we have Black press in Russia. We have Black press in China, in Asia, in Indonesia, and all over the world. Our lack of connectedness. So this app is not only going to help us to distribute our content, but enable us to do business. You'll hear more about it in 2023, but we're breaking the news on Let It Be Known in 2022.
Well, one of a small piece, Doc. I guess you'll save this for another time. Dr. Chavis did have a private conversation, a brief one, but a private conversation with President Biden. I guess he'll tell us more about it at another time.
Last night, got a couple of things into his ear, and hopefully it will benefit the Black press going forward.
Absolutely. Denise, we're looking forward to more great stuff from the summit. I was going to say conference, but the summit. Right. And speaking of conferences, February is coming right up, and we'll be in Puerto Rico. The NNPA will be in Puerto Rico for the Midwinter Conference. Hopefully, everyone is looking forward to that, as we are. And one last thing for you, Al. Michelle Madison says, I try to take my lunch break in order to view Conversations with Al McFarlane. It's an informative show. So, Al, you got fans everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you.
Brown, if I can just throw something in really quick, because I thought about it with Al, and we just had the opportunity to interview the 9-year-old who is one of the leading actors in the movie Emancipation, featuring Will Smith. If you have not seen it, see it. Okay. See it. No matter how you feel about our brother Will, see Emancipation. It's quite an inspiring story.
Look, Will Smith, don't agree with what he did at the Oscars. We all make mistakes, but that guy, there's not too many more talented people than Will Smith. So if you don't want to see a Will Smith movie just because of the Oscars thing, shame on you, in my view. Look, also Win TV. Watch Win TV on Fridays at noon. Denise is there every Friday. She's hosting Win TV, and they always have some great stuff, especially if you're in the DC, if you are interested in DC news, but also she does some national stuff too. And sometimes she even invites me to come on, but it's not often, but it happens.
We'll fix that in 2023.
Thank you all for watching.
All right.
Absolutely. Thank you all for watching Let It Be Known. Thanks, Dr. Chavis. Keep up the great work. Al McFarlane, and of course, Denise Rolark Barnes, the historic Washington Informer. Thank you all. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.